I'm not here to hype a product, I'm here to help you decide if this subwoofer actually belongs in your listening space. When you're eyeing a 15-inch, 1600-watt machine, the first question that pops up is whether you'll ever get out of the way of that kind of power, or end up with a box that sits idle while you're still hunting for that deep rumble in movies and music. If you've ever felt the sting of buying a sub that sounded great on paper but left the couch feeling flat, you'll appreciate a review that looks past the headline numbers and into the day-to-day reality. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The OSD Black Trevoce 15-inch triple driver active subwoofer makes a bold claim with its 1600 W amp and a design that promises full range bass and infrasonics. In practice, that translates into a few concrete things you'll notice once it's plugged in. First, the triple woofer layout means 3 drivers are sharing the workload. That's a clever way to keep each cone from being pushed to its mechanical limits, which in turn helps the unit stay cool even during long movie marathons. In my setup, a medium-sized living room with a 7.2 surround system, the sub filled in the low end without the kind of thermal throttling you sometimes hear from smaller 2-driver units. The sound didn't just stay deep, it stayed consistent from the first boom of an action sequence to the sustained low notes in a soundtrack. What really matters for most people is how the sub integrates into a regular room, not just how it behaves in a controlled test. The Black Trevoce's footprint is surprisingly modest for a 15-inch box. It sits on a sturdy, low-profile stand that can tuck into a corner without demanding a dedicated cabinet. Because it's an active sub, you don't need an external amp, which saves a lot of cable clutter. I ran it straight from the receiver's LFE output, and the auto-level control handled the transition from dialogue-heavy scenes to explosions without any noticeable jumps in volume. The energy-saving label isn't just marketing fluff, it actually reduces power draw when the sub isn't receiving a signal, so your electricity bill won't spike during the hours you're watching sitcoms. Now, let's talk about who will get the most out of this. If you're a home theater enthusiast who already has a solid front left/right setup and you want that extra rumble that makes explosions feel like they're shaking the floor, this is a solid candidate. The deep 15 Hz response is rare in consumer-grade subs, so you'll feel the difference when watching blockbuster movies with well-mixed low-frequency effects. Musicians or producers who need a reference for bass-heavy tracks will also appreciate the extended range, especially if they're working in a room that can accommodate the sub size without it being a visual eyesore. On the flip side, if you live in a small apartment where walls are thin and you're worried about neighbors hearing your bass, the power and depth of the Trevoce could become a liability. While the unit itself is designed to run cool and efficiently, the output is still enough to transmit through drywall. In that scenario, you might be better served by a smaller, sealed sub that sacrifices a bit of depth for a lower acoustic footprint. Likewise, if your primary use is casual TV watching or streaming music at modest volumes, you'll likely never tap into the full 1600 W potential, and a less expensive model could provide a more appropriate cost-to-performance ratio. One practical weakness that shows up after you bring the sub home is the placement sensitivity. Because the 15-inch drivers are designed to move a lot of air, the sub can produce a boomy character if it's placed too close to a wall or corner. I found that moving it a foot away from the nearest surface and angling the front slightly reduced excessive room gain, resulting in tighter bass that didn't overwhelm the mid-range. This isn't a deal-breaker, but it does mean you'll need to experiment a bit during setup, something that can be frustrating if you're hoping for a plug-and-play experience. Another consideration is the control interface. The Trevoce uses a single knob for volume and a few LED indicators for mode and protection. There's no built-in DSP presets, so you'll need to fine-tune crossover settings on your AVR or receiver. For people who like to dive into the details, that's fine. For those who just want to set it and forget its sub, the lack of a more intuitive on-unit menu could feel limiting. When it comes to value, the price point sits higher than many entry-level subwoofers, but you're paying for a combination of high-power amplification, a 3-driver array, and a design that stays cool under load. The real savings appear over time, because it doesn't overheat, you're less likely to encounter premature component failure, and the energy-saving mode helps keep operating costs down. If you compare that to cheaper subs that either struggle to hit deep frequencies or need aftermarket cooling solutions,